switches. So like, yeah. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Cannigma webinar. We have had some pretty awesome webinars in the past, but I have to be honest, this is one that I'm probably most excited for. So if you're just joining us live from Facebook, welcome. We're glad you made it. If you end up showing up later, feel free to just know that we are recording this and it will be available for playback later. So if your kids are screaming or your dog is barking and you need to go run, just know that you can find it on the Cannigma YouTube, and then you can find all of us in our own version of social media. So welcome. What are we going to talk today about? Sleep. And sleep, exactly. And what do we spend the vast majority of our lives doing? Sleeping, or at least more than basically everything else. At least more than we spend working. Maybe we spend on a screen a little bit more than that, but that's a recent trend. Historically, sleep has been what we do most through our entire lives, and it's really important. And so how important? Important enough to have a bunch of people who normally wear white coats come and talk about it. So my name is Codi. I'm your cannabis pharmacist, pediatric pharmacist, and scientific advisor at the Cannigma. I'm joined by a few really special guests, Dr. Salzman, Dr. Tan, and Ms. Becky over here. And they are all also in the healthcare field, but in particular, they're all working around cannabis as medicine and trying to leverage the endocannabinoid system for better health, and in this case, better sleep. So no further ado and yammering from me, Dr. Tan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Codi, and thank you everyone attending this morning. My name is Belinda Tan, and I'm clinically trained as a pathologist and a dermatologist, and I'm also an immunologist. But what's relevant in our conversation today is I have a background in telemedicine, clinical research, and building technology to support FDA clinical trials, meaning all the tests that are needed to pass a drug for approval by the FDA. And where I am today with People Science is I'm co-founder of this new company where we're focusing specifically on alternative medicines. And what categories alternative medicines? These are medicines that are cannabis, probiotics, prebiotics, nutraceuticals, and then all the way to the future of psychedelic medicines. We won't go into too much detail there, but People Science will support what we call the clinical evidence generation to test whether these products are safe and effective for whatever clinical indication you need for your health and wellness. So I'm happy to be in this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Really important work, right? One of the biggest barriers to legitimizing cannabis and any sort of plant mace or alternative medicine is that we don't have enough data. We certainly have enough patients, right? People are consuming these products, purchasing them on the free market, but we're not able to gather the data. And that's really the challenge that we're facing right now. So I love that People Science is swooping in to fill that gap. Becky, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Codi. I'm Becky Little. I have a tiny little company called Attainable Wellness. And I'm retired from a long career in pathology and laboratory medicine. And I like to sleep. I even like naps.
Who doesn't like naps?
I love sleep.
I love it. And so, Becky, you're coming to us from two angles, and that's why we were really excited to have you here today. One, as a patient, someone who has used cannabis to benefit themselves and sort of take control of their own health, and sleep is part of that. And then also, you have clients that you kind of help coach or counsel and sort of go along their cannabis journey. And then when they have questions or they're not sure where they maybe had a misstep, you try to help explain your experience. And if you don't have the answer, then you come hollering at me on LinkedIn. You're like, hey, I have this question. What do I do?
I do. I seek help wherever I need it for my patients. I do. And I also treat animals. I have about 30 animals, 35 animals I treat. They do very well with cannabis.
Yeah, with the low THC product for sure. There's no doubt there's a lot of interest in veterinary medicine, because here's the beauty of this is we know that sleep is important, and we see that cannabis is connected, and that's because your endocannabinoid system is super important at regulating your sleep, and that's what gets me really going. Okay, great. Moving on. Dr. Salzberg, why don't you tell the group why sleep's important to you and kind of your background in this space?
Well, first of all, it's good to be back with everybody. I've done Cannigma stuff before, so I love you guys. Myself and my partner George actually started our integrative medicine practice. We call it integrative cannabis medicine, but now we're sort of going out to psychedelics and plant medicine all over. But grossly, we started the practice. I'm a trauma surgeon and an expert in critical care medicine. I ran trauma in one of the busiest trauma centers in the country for many years. And what we saw was that there were so many patients that had so many issues. And what was happening was they were becoming the victim of polypharmacy. Take this drug, take that drug, take a fifth drug, take a 10th drug. And all of a sudden they were on 12 different drugs, 8 of them probably causing more problems than good. Sort of, we knew there had to be at least a better answer or an alternative answer for us to look at. And the truth of the matter is that when we really got into our practice, everything sort of focused around sleep. We did a phased approach. And then phase 1 was sleep, because that's what had to happen with everybody. With sleep, it was very important that we knew that if the mantra was not if you sleep, your pain gets better. It's if you don't sleep, nothing gets better. And so everything centered around getting people sleeping, because once we got patients sleeping, right, we reset their biorhythms, circadian rhythms, their responsive perception of pain, all the thinking centers in their brain, controlled stress hormones. So many things were accomplished and allowed us to then build on those successes. But again, sleep was phase 1 and the ultimate, because without sleep, we couldn't make any moves with anybody.
And it almost makes sense, right? We know that, again, this is something we spend more of our day doing than any time. We know it's when our brain and our body repairs. And if we're in pain, which is a nervous system disorder, oftentimes anyway, that we need to heal the brain as much as we need to heal the body. So rest is of critical importance. So welcome. This is definitely a dream team. Somebody made a wonderful pun in the comments section. And I'm sure there's more puns to come. So if you missed that one, stay tuned. We'll have you laughing instead of snoring. Okay, so that one wasn't so good, but I promise there's more. Okay, so I love it. We kind of have a sort of a eclectic mix of clinicians here. I kind of mentioned the endocannabinoid system is tied to sleep. Some of the terms that come up when they talk about the endocannabinoid system is rest and protect, and sort of that's heal the body's immune system and to allow it to actually get better. The endocannabinoid system is important there. So Becky, could you maybe tell us about a time that you've seen cannabinoids work in helping people sleep, and then we're gonna talk to the docs about maybe if cannabinoids can be helpful, how, and sort of in what way. I'd like to hear kind of what you've seen. Actually, why don't you start with you? How did you personally use cannabis, and then tell me about maybe one other patient where you've seen benefit.
Okay, well, thank you, Codi. I'm excited to be here on this dream team, and the reason I'm here is I think that there are probably so many people, like Dr. Salzman just said, that are on this journey to find sleep, and that's why I'm here today, because it's that important. So here's the thing about sleep, and I think we've already even said this. I have found with myself and with my patients that the sleep or the lack thereof, usually there's an underlying factor. There's something underlying that keeps you from getting a good sleep. In my patient's experience and in my own experience, I found basically, it's just what you said, it's either anxiety or pain. It's one of those two things. It can be temporary or it can be lifelong. Now with anxiety, I found relationships can cause a lot of anxiety. Your job can cause a lot of anxiety. An illness, a serious illness, causes a tremendous amount of anxiety. we're in a global pandemic. So
we're all a little anxious, isn't that right? I know I felt it.
Huh?
So I said, I know I've felt it. So how are you using personally, like cannabinoids to help deal with that around your sleep quality, and how have you found them beneficial?
Okay. Slow, go, start low and go slow, right? That's the way I've started this. So when I look at my history, it's been more like I started with a full spectrum CBD oil, got nothing. This is me personally. Then I did a full spectrum CBD oil, sublingual with CBN, nothing. Then I went to full spectrum CBD oil, CBN, melatonin. Then I did a CBD transdermal patch on my foot. What was that about? Yeah. Okay, then I got a vaporizer. Now this is a convection oven vaporizer set to 350 degrees. I use a whole flower, and my best ratio is like a 3-to-1 CBD to THC. If I go much higher, I get high, and I don't want that. And I go to these psychedelic dreams where I'm riding, speaking on the back. I literally ride on the back of those monkeys in The Wizard of Oz down to a neon bright yellow brick road.
It sounds like you've experienced this more than once.
It's horrible. And you wake up and you go, oh, it's the THC. And then you go back to the monkey. I'm stuck.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. And I want to just chime in there. I've had multiple patients report this, or friends or whomever, especially around THC. I call it almost, or I've kind of said intense or almost lucid dreams, where people feel very intense sort of stream of consciousness. It's a very unique thing, and that can happen with, generally speaking, too much THC. Yes. So that's great. So vaporizing, so that helps you fall asleep, it sounds like, Becky.
Yes. Oh, and it's a pleasant experience, by the way. Sit outside in my backyard on this summer evening, and I do the vaporizer. I'm never ever for smoking anything ever. And it's a very relaxing time. 30 minutes, I'm asleep. But here's the thing. It didn't keep me asleep all night. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I wake up. Okay. So it's very quick acting. I'm talking about 10 minutes at the most. I start feeling it. Okay. Then in 30 minutes, I'm asleep. But I don't stay asleep. I wake up, and then here we go again. So what did I find that keeps me asleep all night? The gummies. The gummies do. So I take them. They work in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes with me. By the way, I take them with a little bit of food because fats absorb fat right in the stomach, digestive system, right, docs? And
it can be helpful for sure.
Yeah, I've heard that fats absorb fats. So I take with a little bit of food, and my perfect dosage is 50 milligrams of CBD to only 5 milligrams of THC, and that does it for me. I go to sleep and I wake up ready for my day. Ready to go. Hit the tennis courts. Let's go.
That's awesome, Becky. So it sounds like, you found benefit through some dose layering and sort of a therapeutic layering. You kind of mentioned two things about falling asleep and staying asleep. Dr. Salzman, could you kind of tell us more about the differences between those two problems and kind of like lay out what's going on scientifically with Becky and how Becky's sort of stereotypical, I think, in patients who are dealing with sleep?
Yeah, the basic chemistry, everybody on this probably listening is like, well, sure, that makes sense. Because why? Because when you smoke or you vape, it goes in, it works almost instantly within a few minutes and only lasts an hour or two. When you eat it, right, takes an hour or two to work, but can last significantly longer, 4 to 6 hours. And the reality was, this is how we started dealing with sleep, was to finesse it. There were some people who had trouble falling asleep. There were other people, and everyone who's listening to this is going to go, that's me, wakes up at the same time every single night. I wake up every night at 2, it's either 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Every single one of our patients said the same exact thing. And so what we did was we finessed the chemistry of it, meaning vaping it or smoking it, or even the THC sprays or nasal spray was very good because it was short acting, right? And it was immediate acting. So you could get people to sleep. And while that was going on, we would tell people to start slowly. Start with 2.5 milligrams, go up by 2.5 milligrams each night till you figure out what's the dose that puts you to sleep. What if you look at what my data shows, 6 hours. When we had patients and I did sleep math with them, I'd go through the same thing with every patient. Codi, here's what I got. What time did you go to bed? I sleep 6 hours a night. Okay, what time did you go to bed last night? 12. Okay, what's the first time you woke up to pee? 2. What time did you actually fall asleep? 1. What's time next time you go to bed? 4. And when you finally did the sleep math, maybe they were getting 2-3 hours of sleep. The number was 4. Everybody was getting 4 or less when they came into us. But when we were able to finesse the chemistry in terms of getting them to sleep, in other words, a short-acting product, and one that while they were sleeping, sort of have that oral or that longer-acting product pull them into those deeper stages of sleep, right? The important thing that happens is you want to get people into this deep restorative sleep. They used to call it stage 4. They lump everything together now. It's REM and stage 3. But those deeper levels of sleep where we actually have dreams, that's the poor man's way of knowing how good is our sleep. If you're dreaming, you know at least that you're getting in to that deeper level of sleep that you need to be in. The goal was get people sleeping and then give them an oral product that grabbed them before they woke up and sort of hopefully pull them into those deeper, longer periods of that restorative sleep. And exactly what she's done with herself is the same exact thing we did, patient after patient, and finessed it and refined it until we had thousands of people. And we knew, okay, start with this. Here's a good starting dose. And here's a good starting of use this to fall asleep, use this to stay asleep, and let's make the calculations based on where people were at. Even if they were cannabis users, because the goal wasn't, a lot of these, especially with cannabis users, they're programmed that, well, if I'm not high or if I don't feel anything, it's not working. And it's not the case. We're looking for endpoints. It's not take this or take that. It's take this, sleep 6 to 7 hours a night. Take this, have an anti-inflammatory response. You're trying to finesse it, to get all that, the science and the chemistry working together for the patient.
Yeah, it's about achieving those outcomes, right? But the problem is right now we're not doing a good job of measuring them. And I think someone on the panel might agree with me, and she is interested in trying to collect that data better. So Dr. Tan, could you maybe elaborate more on what People's Science doing to sort of address maybe what the right regimen is or what the right ratio of THC might be?
Yeah, Codi, I imagine everyone listening right now is like, all right, I'm going to try what Becky just described, and I wish I could make an appointment with Dr. Salzman and this group to get this figured out. Which brings us to People's Science. So Becky is the single person. Dr. Salzman is a community of a lot of clinicians and patients. And People's Science is the organization that will have the tech to support all consumers. And so what we're describing right here is a lot of different self-inquiries where the thousands of Beckys are kind of tinkering and doing this on their own. And I saw you looking at your notes. So you've been taking notes, you're collecting the data, but yes. Where's that data going back to? It's going back to you. You're getting the feedback and you're making your decision of what am I going to test next? Because I know this didn't work. I'm going to do this and this, but not everyone knows how to do that in a very systematic way. You come from a background of pathology, so you think systematically. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Salzman with his team of other doctors and patients is collecting the data in the real world. So what's missing here is to put it together in a body of data where an organization or regulatory agency like an FDA, but this doesn't necessarily require FDA, but one of those organizations can say, this data looks solid, the people are safe, and it's effective. And effective is where we look at outcomes. So we're talking about what are the outcomes? Are you sleeping better? That's subjective. How long are you sleeping? That's objective. How long does it take you to fall asleep? That's another objective measure. All of these are different types of outcomes that we would design into a clinical research study so we can collect it in a systematic way at scale, meaning thousands and thousands of people, putting it together into a statistical model so we can interpret it and say, yes, this data shows statistical significance, and here's what we found. So that's what we're trying to build to this whole ecosystem of medical cannabis, psychedelic medicines and other alternatives that consumers are taking and using, and really trying to figure out what works for me. Because what works for Becky, what works for any of Dr. Salzman patients, doesn't necessarily work for you, believe it or not. So that's a fact about a lot of medicines. Is even the medicines that have been approved by the FDA, it's only been tested in several thousand people, and the majority of it are Caucasians. So when you take it out into the real world, and now you're treating people, millions and millions of people, you start to see side effects. You start to see no effects. You start to see, things that you didn't see in the actual clinical trials. So it's really, really important that we put into the framework of how drugs are approved and what works and what not, what doesn't, is what was a patient tested on, what were the outcomes, and think about it in the context of, well, okay, how does it apply to me? And with People Science, we hope to help you to address what works for me.
Yeah, I think aggregate data, right? And that's what we're trying to do. These clinical trials are really, really expensive for these monomolecular drugs. No one is going to pay for them for non-patentable medications. We don't need evidence to say that. We've seen it play out over the last 30, 50 years. So we need more people sciences, and we need more data collection, and even more than that, like tools, right? And I know that's another thing that People Science is working to do, because collecting this data is taxing. Becky kind of, had her notes there, and I know Dr. Salzman talked about his big data set, but when you started getting into metadata, it's almost impossible for a Dr. Salzman to even crunch that. So how's People Science collecting that unique data? Because I think people like tech, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, we're really excited. We'll be launching our prototype tech sometime the end of this year. And the intent is for all consumers to use the tech to do self-inquiry studies. So for example, Becky would use our tech, it's called Chloe, and you would start to track, okay, what do I care about? I'm gonna track my sleep. What parts of my sleep do I care about? My latency, my duration, my quality. And then I'm going to input what my intervention is. At this time, it's going to be this new gummy with this ratio of THC to CBD. And then what it will do is launch you into a protocol that we design on the back end to take you through, here's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and look at your data over time and track it. And you can say, oh, when I stopped it, my sleep actually got worse, and when I started, it got better, or vice versa. And then you can start to make the decisions on your own and have the data all collected, rather than just writing notes on paper that you might lose. So the idea is that we can engage all consumers in the self-inquiry process around some basic metrics of wellness. So not only sleep, but there will be mood, there will be skin health, and some other basic things that a lot of people care about, and is a very relatable metric to what they would think as good health.
I love it. That sort of innovation is what we need. We're just in desperate need of more data to go by. So, speaking of data and what we have, Dr. Salzman, you mentioned dreams earlier, and maybe I'm jumping into this topic a little early, but I maybe it just interests me a lot. Becky's shirt, you can't see it, says dream on it. She made sure to share that with us earlier. But anyway, you talked about data. When you're using your patients and you're using that CBD, THC combo, what do they report as far as dreams? Are your patients typically dreaming? Because I know that THC, often is associated with forgetting our dreams. Could you kind of build on that for me?
So it's very interesting when you read about small studies versus anecdotally what you see after thousands and thousands of people. And there's you're vastly different. Here's what anecdotally we've seen. We're talking about, I've seen like 4,000 or 5,000 patients myself in the last few years, maybe 30,000 across the country now. First of all, the first question we ask people, like I said, the poor man's way of how good is your sleep? We do sleep math, and we do, are you dreaming? And you know what the usual answer is? I don't remember the last time I dreamt. I don't dream. And then I hear other people say, I smoked. I used to smoke a lot, and then I stopped, and all of a sudden I had all these crazy dreams. And so we've seen the pendulum completed both ways. So it's very interesting when we talk about dreams, because the reality is, I think if patients are quote unquote dreaming, to me, that's good. Even initially, if it's nightmares, although we could talk about that because they try to use THC in using it with PTSD patients who have severe nightmares. But the truth of the matter is, once you get patients sleeping 6 to 7+ hours a night, night after night after night, eventually you reset their brains. And oddly enough, what I thought was going to happen when we started the practice was, oh, these people are going to finally start sleeping and dream, and then they're going to need more THC, and they're going to develop this and that. It's not actually in practice what happened. What happened was many of the people that we asked weren't having good enough sleep to ever get into that stage where they were sort of consistently dreaming, or that they even had recollection that they were dreaming. Once we got them sleeping and we could just sort of inch up and get them 6 to 7 hours a night, and we can then mimic it. In other words, if they knew to take a certain amount of CBD, or they took a 2-to-1, whatever it is, they 10 milligrams, put them to sleep for 6 to 7 hours a night, they'd repeat it night after night after night. And over a period of what was only a few months, their brains reset. And it's all about this neuroplasticity and the rewiring of the brain. But once you could reset their brain, boom. What actually happened was they were dreaming. They weren't really having those nightmares. And once you reset their brain, many of them stopped reaching for whatever they were using at night because their brain was reset, and they were able to start sleeping again without the use of the gummy or this, or I'm using my melatonin or all this other stuff. That's what actually happened. But in the beginning, to use it as a tool to get patients into that restorative sleep and to get them dreaming, this was the way to go about doing it. Was that mixture of CBD and THC, finding the right amount for people, and slowly going up. We grossly underdosed CBD, as a side note. One of the things that we realized, and it took us quite some time, our patient population was being grossly, and I mean grossly, underdosed with CBD. And you say, how much grossly underdosed? I don't have it actually where it's all been sort of statistically analyzed, but just anecdotally, there's no question that patients, when they got that 6 to 7 hours a night of sleep and their brains reset and stuff, everything followed suit. And it was very important to not necessarily trace after they're having bad dreams or good dreams, but more so focusing on getting them into that stage of sleep where dreaming was occurring. And for the people who are having nightmares, I got to be honest, once we started actually getting them sleeping on a consistent basis and it wasn't broken sleep, their nightmares actually got better. And many of these people weren't suffering from that much longer. And I understand. Now, there's plenty of people listening that are going to say, well, they say that when you acutely stop, using THC and stuff, you have all these crazy dreams and all. Yes, that might be true, but I'm telling you, after thousands and thousands of patients, the goal was not to follow these outliers. Oh my God, I'm having nightmares. Oh my God, I'm having anxiety. Sleep and anxiety were intimately linked. You fix one, you massively impacted both, number one. And number two, getting patients to sleep and getting them to dream was the key, because I knew I was getting them into that right restorative phase of sleep. I knew we could start attempting to rewire their brains. I knew we can put lifestyle changes that they could actually now begin to do. And if you sleep like shit and you feel like shit, nobody gets better. It doesn't matter what you do. And until you fix those two things, nothing else matters. But I'm telling you that the majority of patients where you read about all these, I have bad dreams, I have this, I have that, using the cannabis as a tool to get them to sleep a bare minimum of 6 to 7 hours a night massively impacted our ability to fix everything. Pain, anxiety, you name it. Go ahead, whatever it was.
Yeah. What's interesting is the endocannabinoid system connects all those systems: our pain, our anxiety, and our mood, and our sleep. The ECS, this internal cannabis-like system, our fats in our body sending signals, is actually what mediates a lot of these responses. And so it's no surprise to me that those are all intertwined. And I agree, sleep is the foundation. My pharmacist opinion is that THC can suppress dreams you also become pretty tolerant to THC pretty quickly. So unless you continue to escalate the dose, the dreams can definitely kind of break through later. And then outside of maybe chronic consumption, I don't think you see that sort of cannabis withdrawal sort of rebound nightmare that you're referring to. But that can happen. If you've been smoking THC regularly for quite some time and you stop abruptly, there can definitely be some rebound sort of intense dreams. At least that's been well documented and reported on the internet too. So
but it's just like everything else, Cody, right? It's just like everything else. When you know, whatever substance you put into your body, whether it be a plant-based medicine, an American pharmaceutical, whatever it is, truth is that you rewire the brain every time. Take this, now the brain rewires. Like I tell patients all the time, if I took your 20-year-old brain and stuck it in your head right now, you'd be in the fetal position on the ground crying and screaming because it would be like a sudden, unbelievable shock to your system. But you see how all these chronic pain patients and poor sleep associated with it, their brains start to rewire and they're a shell of what they were or who they were, which is why when we start treating patients, phase 1 is sleep. Every patient we saw had some form or another of insomnia, anxiety, or depression. And when you got patients sleeping and you use that to pivot off of, this is how people got better. That was it. It wasn't like we said, let's fix sleep first. We noticed after, just like that, as soon as we started doing all these different things and, well, that didn't work, then this didn't work. It's exactly how we did it. We just went little by little, slow escalation of doses, playing around with cannabinoid ratios to figure out, you know, person to person what worked, and then sort of make these generalizations so at least we could have a good starting point with the patients because we see so many of them now.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Dr. Tan's data start to compile, and then we have even more good data to go off of and just really maybe help hone in on which patients might be better at starting with this ratio, right? That PTSD patient may respond differently than the traditional insomnia patient. So it's data we don't really have outside of sort of our niche little data sets, and I think that's great. So our lovely Wizard of Oz in the background has offered to have a question. We have a lot of really great questions coming in, so thank you everyone who's tuning in with us. This is a Cannigma webinar, and we like to do these. Today's topic is sleep. Thanks for hanging with us so far if you're here. So Yanni, do we have a question? We sure do. Debbie Sharon chimes in and asks, can you speak to changes in REM with cannabinoids? Close to our dreams. Debbie has found that CBD about an hour before bed, she falls asleep easily. And not only does she have more REM sleep, but the cycles last longer. So I guess that means she has longer, sort of maybe more intense dreams or more regular dreams. And REM sleep is rapid eye movement, and that's the phase of sleep that is associated with dreaming and also not being able to move, actually, where our body starts to sort of shut off. So who wants to chime in? Steve or Belinda? I'm going to let you guys fight over it.
No, I'm talking too much.
Oh, thank you for this. This might actually be a Steve as a sleep physician question, but I will overlay in terms of the scientific lens on this. I know there's a lot of online information that cannabinoids or THC, I guess specifically, can decrease your REM, and then maybe some limited studies in animals as well. And what that means is that we don't yet have the clinical data in humans at scale, and that is robust. And also, what I am aware of as I respect all these deep medical expertise, sleep medicine is an extremely interesting field where they're starting to uncover so much more beyond non-REM and REM. So there's a lot of understanding that, there's deep sleep and what's happening there in terms of the function in your brain, the consolidation of memory, the healing, if you're using plant medicines, all of those things we still have to study. Thus the need for consumers to get more involved with clinical research. But I'll go ahead and defer to Dr. Salzman to share from your clinical perspective, an answer for Debbie. Thank you for the question.
Definitely, of course. Actually, I want to chime in with Becky real quick. Becky, what has your experience been using CBD before bed? How does that affect your dreams as a patient?
Well, interesting. The CBD didn't affect my dreams at all. When I added the THC, the first time I had a dream that I knew was not my normal dream, I woke up and I thought, oh, so I was aware of it. I was conscious that that wasn't what I normally dream. It was something different. And I woke up and was conscious that, oh, it must be the THC or what I took or the cannabis. So I was very aware of it. Interesting, when I would go back to sleep, I would continue with the dream. It would keep going. So I couldn't really escape it, but I knew it didn't really bother me because I knew it was because of what I took, and that was okay. I was sleeping and that was okay. It was a good trade.
Yeah, interesting. And again, as our endocannabinoid system adjusts to the cannabinoids that we consume regularly, the effect of taking a cannabis-based medicine for sleep is going to kind of differ over time if you use the same dose, just because the dynamic nature of the ECS, the body becomes sort of attuned, neuroplasticity is involved, and sort of which part of the brain is used to being activated. And Steve, I think we kind of touched on this a lot, on changes in REM sleep with cannabinoids. But do you have anything to kind of build on about maybe duration of REM or just any pearls about REM sleep that you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, it's interesting I wonder what other quote unquote cannabinoids Debbie's using, because I don't want to get into this whole thing yet about cannabinoids, because depending on which ones we're talking about, we can have a whole discussion. I don't want to, But I mean, it's interesting because if you look at the studies, and if let's just take it in a vacuum, she's just using CBD. When you look at it grossly, they say, right, CBD in lower amounts are stimulating, while in higher amounts can be sedating. I don't necessarily know that we've found that to be the case. I think a full spectrum CBD along with some THC ultimately helps put everything together, like you had said before, like that helps put everything together in terms of pushing them into that deeper restorative sleep. CBD is very effective for a lot of our patients. That's why we came out with a 3,000 milligram full spectrum one, so that our patients can get hold of one at the correct dose to give it a shot. But again, I think a lot of our patients, especially because they have pain and other issues compounded on the fact that their sleep is bad, it helps to stick in something like THC because of its analgesic effects, because it helps with sedative effects. Again, it's using the chemistry of the plant and the various cannabinoids in concert together to reach it. So I'm glad that CBD is working. Many of our patients, in truth, need a little bit of THC with it as well.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the Entourage Effect. So for those listeners, if you haven't seen the Cannigma's new article, we just posted it on social media, LinkedIn today. It is specifically focused on the Entourage Effect. And this really drives home the point here is what that means is that the multiple components of the cannabis plant working together in the body produce a better effect than just one of those molecules alone. So CBD isolate does not work necessarily as well as a full spectrum sort of high CBD variety. And while this is still a somewhat contentious issue, you know what? Just read the article. Go read the article. You'll get to learn about all of this over there. But actually, this is probably a good time to bring up the pink elephant cannabinoid in the room. And I haven't seen this question roll in yet, so I'm disappointed in our readers and watchers. But I really do want to touch about. We talked about THC. We've talked about CBD. It's anti-inflammatory and really beneficial. But if you go to the internet and you type in cannabinoids in sleep, you're going to get one hit 1,000 times, and that's CBN. CBN is cannabinol. Just for anyone who's listening, look at Holly Lynn chimes in as CBN. She knew where I was going. So CBN is actually a degradation product of THC. The plant does not produce CBN. CBN is after THC is produced in the plant, and it's slowly degraded in the sunlight, in the air, or when you apply flame. There can be some degradation, and that converts to CBN. Now, about 10 or 12 years ago, I'm not going to say the lab, but a lab came out with the very compelling story that this product could help with sleep. And that has taken off, and it is everywhere. So please, Becky, you've tried CBN, and you're not convinced.
It didn't help.
We're going to let the docs get into it. Didn't work for you.
No, and I even had some neighbors that we walk the dogs at night or something. I have some neighbors that, well, really this whole past year, everybody's having trouble having sleep. They really are. And I know the pandemic has added to that. But I had some neighbors and friends, a couple of people on my tennis team try the full spectrum CBD with CBN added. Nobody wanted it. Nobody
Wasn't
wanted
helping,
it.
huh?
No,
Interesting.
nobody wanted it. When I did add the melatonin, I do have about 3 friends who that does it for them. They're happy with the full spectrum CBD oil with the CBN, and it's a 2 milligrams of melatonin. And they're happy.
Melatonin, I mean, that's something that a lot of us sort of know and use. It's a medicine we keep in the hospital, and many of us can get it now. So it's no surprise that the cannabinoid product, that has melatonin is helping. Steve, you formulated some products. Your company makes a few CBD products. You don't have any CBN products? What's up with that?
Mm-hmm. I just lectured to Australia 2 weeks ago to the new International College of Cannabinoid Medicine that they're starting. And I literally had a complete meltdown when we talked about CBN. But here's why. Let's be very careful about not turning the cannabis industry into the grossness that is the pharmaceutical industry. Let's talk about CBN for real, not the pie in the sky, what you Google, okay? CBN is great for pain. It's great for inflammation. It has great antibacterial properties. However, in the several small trials that they've done, it's demonstrated that it has no sedative qualities, 0. And the fact of the matter is that I think when you really look at those small studies, it's probably CBN's reaction in together some conjunction with THC that sort of causes a heavier sedative effect of the THC and not of the CBN. This is what we got to be careful about. Cherry picking out cannabinoids and ingredients and now building an entire industry around them. Because this is what's happened with sleep, right? Here, give you a perfect, for instance, nothing to do with cannabis. How many people have been giving drugs that are so gross to prescribe for sleep that it turns your stomach? Here, I'll give you one, Seroquel. Why would anybody take Seroquel? What the hell is that? It's just, you can't throw shit against the wall and see what sticks.
It's an antipsychotic for those who are listening.
And it gives great dreams. It's silly. It's just silly. We have to be very, very cautious about going after things. Many of the things that we do, let's take pain, for instance. It's incorrect the way we're managing it. It's Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. Instead of drilling down on what's going on and fixing those things, you try to fix it. Oh, you have pain, now it's time for Norco. Oh, I'm going to crank your dose up. Now it's time for sleep meds. Now it's time for antidepressants. Now it's time. Now you're not sleeping. Now Seroquel. Now this, now. It's just they start chasing things with Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. And you go to the doctor and he just wants to get out his script and write whatever the hell is going to help to try to fix that one problem that you came in to complain about. Instead of taking a step back and grossly looking at the entire situation and fixing those parameters that need to be fixed, right? Anxiety, insomnia, depression. Every single patient had them. And when we started getting things in order, they started getting better. It wasn't magic, but it was doing things in a very stepwise, progressive fashion, not using things like one, a CBN or a medicine, trying to sort of finesse it so that you can use as little as possible for maximum effect, with the ultimate goal of weaning them very soon after we reset their brain off of some of the stuff that we've even started them on.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, is that we can't really pick and choose. And what happened here is marketers got ahead of the science. And then what happened is they retroactively went and tried to cherry pick and doctor up or sort of put lipstick on this science that really didn't say what the messaging was. But I'm interested to hear if Dr. Tan at People Science if CBN is something on their radar, because I will say the consumer is certainly interested in this molecule. People are buying and consuming it. I'm in California, and these products, all of the most popular brands have now come out with a sleep-oriented product and CBN and THC generally a ratio. So is that something on your radar at People Science?
Yeah, Cody. First I'll echo, yes, the marketing got a lot of the science, and that's exactly why a lot of the alternative medicines and consumer products like cannabis have a lot of catching up to do in terms of where's the clinical evidence. So unlike the prescription medications that have years and years and rigorous clinical research behind it, these products don't. And so that's 100%. And then in terms of what People Science can do, Becky, I'm thinking about your friends for whom CBN does work, but it's with full spectrum and there's a little melatonin. Well, wouldn't it be interesting to use our future tool or a tool like it to have them do a test, and they can actually compare, 1 month of what they're using, stop for a month, or start another one where it's just the full spectrum CBD plus melatonin, but no CBN, and see what differences there are in terms of their sleep metrics. That could be really interesting. And people could do that scale. So everyone who's out there and wants to test their CBN product to something else, they could go and do a sleep protocol on the self-inquiry in that sort of journey. And I think that would be really interesting. What we intend to do also for People Science is to aggregate this data that's decentralized and de-identified, and give that data back to the consumer, give it back to the people, give it back to the healthcare provider community, because that's another huge audience who we find are at a loss for how they can help their patients provide actual good information, good knowledge. Most of the time, we hear about the Dr. Google, and I really respect that my patients go out and do a lot of the research on their own and come back to me. I think that's key. So we have to support the medical community to give them the knowledge so they can shepherd and guide their patients, to better health.
I think it's great, and what you can do at People Science, I love it. It's in the name. It's sort of in the mantra and in the whole feel of the company is trying to aggregate data that's already being generated. It's just getting it from the people who are generating said data and aggregating it. So I think you're filling a need here, and I can't wait to see what People Science does in the future. What's up, Becky? You're up.
I'd like to say this. 2 summers ago, before the pandemic, 2019.
Good times. Really, really hard to.
2019, the summer of 2019. I did something as a in pathology that I know that the doctors know. I did the first 50 patients I did what's called a patient population verification that we do to verify different products in the lab and see what our population is, as opposed to like the effect of drugs or anything on our population is different from, say, Denver, Colorado's, or Norway. I had to do verifications on my population in my community, right? So I took this to the CBD, and that was in 2019. The first 50 patients I did, I didn't care what they told me their results were. Okay, and I gave them a week to do follow-up. I said, whatever your results, if you even have no results, please tell me. And they did it. And I did 50 patients. And it was amazing. And I can see my learning curve along the way also. I learned as I went, because 2019, okay, yeah, so I had to learn too. So I learned with them, and we learned together. But overwhelmingly,
same with doctors.
What, Cody?
Doctors learn with their patients, and physicians are still figuring out medical cannabis as well.
After about the first 20, I could see that I needed to up the dosage. And I could also see clearly that women were way more sensitive to it than men were. I could see that very clearly. Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, that is a commonality. It's super interesting. I really want to get to a couple of these questions, Becky. I don't mean to cut you off, but we are sticklers on time. But no, that's interesting. And I think applying these methods, gathering the data to everyone who's listening, this is what Becky did on, this custom scale, but you can do this for yourself. You can keep a sleep log. You can actually take measurements and sort of set goals for what you want to do around your sleep. You're not complacent in this process. Only you can help your sleep. And you can try drugs. Drugs can help, whether that's Xanax or Seroquel, I hope not, or THC and CBD. That'll only take you so far. There's a whole component about sleep health, sleep wellness, sleep hygiene that it sounds like we're not going to have time to talk about. Maybe and maybe we're not the perfect crew to do that, as we're a little more focused on cannabis. But there is a lot to be said about sleep health, right?
Yes.
So Yanni, I know that, he had a question coming. The question, it was regarding the sort of rebound dreams and sort of how cannabinoids can affect our sleep. And the question was, can THC rebound also happen with CBD? So I guess the question is have you seen patients when they stop their CBD, Dr. Salzberg, have dreams out of abnormal dreams? My hunch is probably not, but maybe.
I mean, listen, it's so vast. And since we don't have randomized, double-blinded, prospective setup studies, we're anecdotally collecting this data from patient to patient to patient. But I will say that we have, first of all, the doses that we're using to accomplish what we need to accomplish were much lower than we ever thought we would need to use. Because once you finessed it together, you didn't have to escalate up the doses to get the effect. You just sort of had to finesse the chemistry so it worked. In terms of CBD, number one, we haven't seen any significant rebound at all. As a matter of fact, as we're looking at the data, like I said at the beginning, initially, we were grossly underdosing our patient population for CBD, to trigger those strong anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiolytic reactions and stuff. We were grossly underdosing it. But what it looks like is happening is once we start at the correct dose with a full spectrum CBD product, that's really full spectrum CBD, and you cranked it up, the reality is that the maintenance of it, we were able to significantly come down on it. So many of the people didn't have a rebound effect, and actually we were able to sort of sustain that anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety effects that they were getting with even smaller doses, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, right, you had to go big or go home.
That reset button.
You could dial it back pretty quick after that. And I see there's another question about CBD and medications. Yes, and I know Codi can talk about, there's all sorts of potential interactions with various medicines and blood pressure medicine. I can only speak to our product since we follow it so closely. We have yet to see a drug-drug interaction with using CBD. So even though there has been very much so reported, action reaction with other medicines and stuff, we haven't seen that with CBD. The reality is that it's been well tolerated. We have not had a lot of drug-drug interactions. We've not had to crank it up. And more so, we've been able to settle it back down to the point where I'm wondering, at what point do we try to pull the people off to see, do you need to stay on it sustained or not? I don't know the answer to that yet. We're trying to figure that out now. But there's no question that it's, in our experience, CBD has been extraordinarily safe and effective and has not caused interaction with other medicines. And again, we'll go through medicines with patients. We'll try to tell them to take it at times when it's not when they take their other medicines. But, again, you got to talk with your physician and stuff. You got to be very careful. Some of the physicians aren't going to know the answer to the question of how does cannabis react with anything. And that's because they don't teach it in medical school. As a trauma critical care guy, what the hell did I know about cannabis until I delved into it, stopped doing everything, and that was my entire practice for the past 4 years, right? Otherwise, most physicians aren't going to know. It's not because they're idiots. It's not because they didn't learn it. They were never taught anything. This is brand new stuff.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's new science, right? So endocannabinoid system was only discovered in 1995, 1988 to be the earliest part of it. But and in those years, and then building on that, they're just not being taught in medical school. A lot of physicians don't know about the endocannabinoid system in general, right? The only reason they know about it is because they think THC acts on it, not because it's extraordinarily important to all of the regulatory functions in your body, including eating, sleeping, digesting, and all sorts of things. So definitely really interesting stuff. We wanted to talk about statins and drug interactions. Importantly, drug interactions are possible with CBD. It's going to matter about so many factors that we don't know. Please talk to your physician or pharmacist if you're going to take prescription medicines. And obviously, with any medication, the higher the dose you take, the more likely you are to experience drug interactions, side effects, etc. So start low, go slow, just like we told you and taught you earlier. We wanted to talk about, everyone's asking about the terpenes and their effect on sleep. We forgot about this and we're running out of time, so we better talk about it. What's the deal? Are indicas good for sleep? And what does that mean from a terpene perspective? I'm kicking it to you guys. What do the experts say? I'm sure that you're interested in gathering the data around this, Dr. Tan.
Absolutely. And I'll defer to the practitioners. Becky, if you have any stories about this, would love to hear.
With the terpenes, actually, Dr. Tan, I have more stories with pain management with the terpenes, particularly beta-caryophyllene. I've had some real good chronic pain patients that have had help with that terpene added. But I find in general, if you just stay with the full spectrum, the way the plant came and is built is beautiful. The plant's great. And I just find if you stay with the plant and the terpenes that are included in a plant, then you do pretty well. Then
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because beta-caryophyllene is notoriously anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
It activates the CB2 receptor.
Yeah.
This has been shown in numerous animal and preclinical studies. And doing that is going to help with pain, maybe anxiety and inflammation. And we talked about how this is all interconnected through this magical
And Dr.
system.
Tan, I've even seen that with animals.
That's cool.
Animals, arthritic Labrador Retriever.
Becky, you should use the tool on animals too. We can start to build knowledge for veterinary medicine.
Yes.
We need
we don't
it.
want
we
our
need
animals
it.
hurting. Yeah.
Dr. Salzman, have you seen anything about cannabinoid terpenes, myrcene? I know that's a common sleepy talk.
There's no question that when we start discussing the 2.0 version of cannabis medicine, terpenes are going to play a role, and a significant one. And I think we lack the real insight into them. But there's no question, myrcene, linalool, limonene, beta-caryophyllene, terpinolene, all of these potentially have sedative effects or can potentially help with sleep. And again, you're starting to see the industry respond to this now, where it used to be the percent of THC and CBD, and that was all in it. Now you have the breakdown of the cannabinoids, THCA, see this, and then they start having the terpene breakdown.
Right.
And I think once we start getting, I agree with what you said, Becky, right? It's like, stop playing games. Give them the whole damn plant and let their body decide what it needs and how to work. Once we start finessing and playing games, right, now it's just it all becomes nebulous, right? I like what you're saying, and I think you're right. Give a full spectrum product, or, give the entire plant, a whole plant product, and allow the body to take what it needs. I mean, isn't this what they've been doing for thousands of years before we got years? Okay, just making sure.
But before we could ever assess terpene profiles, people were assessing plants with their nose. And I think that's a really important topic of conversation when we talk about terpenes and entourage, is we have this very acute sense of smell. it's not as good as a dog, but it's still very profound, and smells tie into memories. And there's so much actually going on here when it comes to terpene profiles. But there's no doubt that they are bioactive. And I love the way you said that, Dr. Salzman, terpenes 2.0. If you want to read more about terpenes and how they might be contributing to the overall effects of cannabis, once again, visit Cannigma.com. Check it out in the comments. We just put out an awesome infographic on Entourage. I don't normally tout our infographics this much, but I'm telling you, this one's dope. And so definitely check it out. I really want to kind of talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing in the space and where people can come to find you. So Dr. Tan, what sort of really important information you want to share with the guests before we wrap up here today?
Yeah, thanks, Cody. After all this talk about how you can do more research and self-inquiry, we just launched a pilot project looking at medical cannabis and sleep for healthy adults. It has to be residents of Los Angeles in this area. So we'll go ahead and share a link to sign up for that study. But essentially, it's awesome. It essentially gives you and empowers you as the research participant the ability to start on this. How do I test things on myself? What are the data that I track? What does that feel like? How do I motivate myself? How do I titrate? And that study will just bring you into that world. So we really hope to be able to work with all of you in terms of how to bring science more into your life and sleep.
Sign up for the People's Science Study, especially you LA folks, but I'm sure they're interested in expanding beyond here in the relatively near future. So put your email in there and they'll keep you updated and all of that. Dr. Salzman, where can people find you? What do they definitely need to Google right after your name? And what are we looking for?
Who needs the most help on this panel is what they ought to Google. But we're greencaremedical.com is our website. We're in 20, 30 states now across the country. I'm licensed in multiple states now because a bunch of people wanted to see me, but we have like some of the top physicians in the country from multiple disciplines who see patients. We're gathering all of the data so that we can prolifically write about our experience and sort of share with the medical community, hey, here's what we found, at least anecdotally and observationally, and hopefully we can build, those true, randomized, double-blinded prospective trials where we can really sort of figure out what's what and not talk in terms of anecdotally or I've seen thousands. That's great, but clearly what Belinda's doing is the wave of the future. We need to apply real science, real markers, and take the data and really respond to it. But greencaremedical.com is our website and stuff. And we love the Cannigma, and I'm sure I'm going to be back on here again. Me, my insanity. I'm going to bring George, my partner, with me next time. So we can go crazy also.
If he's half as much energy as you, we certainly won't have any time or any hard time filling the void here. But definitely, if you need a cannabis card and you're in one of the states that Dr. Salzman practices in, they can help you. And they also make a really great CBD full spectrum product that was recommended a few times throughout our conversation here today. And Becky, is there anywhere you would like the guests to follow you? Is there any social media platforms or websites they can check out?
Well, thanks, Cody. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That has been extremely helpful for me. And then most of my patients find me just sitting on my back porch.
You're a local gal. You're taking care of the community.
I'm a local gal. I am. And you won't believe what patients will tell you on your back porch instead of a clinical setting. It's amazing. And
drop the white coat. They talk to you all differently.
They got white coat, put on the flip-flops, sit down with a Topo Chico, and they'll spill their guts. They'll spill it.
Oh, a Topo Chico, whatever that is.
It's a drink here that we have. Mineral water. Yeah, sure. But I would like to say one thing, and that is always tell your doctor that you take CBD oil or cannabis, that your doctor needs to know this so bad. So don't be afraid. There's patient confidentiality, and please tell your physician. All right. But you can find me on Pop Colorado. Here's where I am.
PopColorado.com.
PopColorado.com. That's based in Fort Collins, Colorado. I am the medical cannabis practitioner there. I blog. I video. I take bike rides and talk about the CBD while I'm riding my bicycle. So that's where I
Wearing a helmet.
Place. Oh gosh,
That's great. Yeah.
Going over the bridge and it's bumping like that. I'm okay. I'm okay.
All of the speakers, are on on LinkedIn, Instagram. I think 2 out of 3 of us, maybe Becky, you're on Instagram. Yes. I don't see you there. You can definitely find me at Cannabis PharmD on Instagram. Please, promote cannabis as medicine, because cannabis is medicine. We have to treat it as such, though. And doing that means we have to start gathering the data. We have to start, thinking mindfully about how we consume it. But thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. This went off without a hitch, and I am really excited. So thank you to everyone who stuck around for the whole thing. And thank you once again to our excellent panel for sharing their wisdom. And the best of luck to all of you in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Codi.
Thank you, Codi.
Right,
thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.